So starting with Bravery, I'm very interested to hear this with the life you've had, but can you actually pinpoint one moment in your life that you think is your bravest?
I did have to think about this. I think there's different types of bravery, isn't there? And I wouldn't look back and say I'm a particularly brave person. As in, that's not, I can think of lots of other people who I would think, wow, that was an extraordinarily brave thing to do or to go through. And I look back and I feel like I've had a very fortunate life. So actually, I don't feel like I've been up against a great deal of adversity, maybe, and that's what I associate maybe with bravery. But that could be I've always had quite a positive mindset. So when things happen to me, I think I've naturally reframed them quite quickly to go, what could be, what could be the gift in this, as opposed to it being a disaster. But I guess the one thing that did come to mind when I thought about the question was being made redundant, especially as I said earlier, I'd been in my industry doing what I do well and enjoying it for, I think, 24 years at that point. And although actually I knew it was the right time actually to be made redundant and to do something different, because my time at the business, I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do anymore in terms of adding value. It was a difficult time for the industry. It was a good time to move on. It's still that moment when someone says you're at risk of redundancy, and actually if you know the business well enough, you know what they're really saying is it's not a risk, you are actually going to be leaving, it can be really difficult, I think, because certainly looking back, I probably put a great deal of my identity was wrapped up in my work. I think now I recognise probably I'm more than my work. And you know that you have so many different identities, and actually if you stripped it all away, I'm still me, is probably what I know now. But back then, which was only 6 years ago, that felt like I was going to need to be quite brave. And I think what I did next was probably what I think was brave, which is rather than just go straight in and join another business doing the same as I did, because I had such a specialism, I knew I could have done that. I chose to do something completely different. And people still ask, how on earth did you jump from that to that? And you have quite strong influences like parents' voices. My mum would go, I can't believe you've left like this amazing career that you've had. What on earth are you doing? I don't even understand what you do as a job now. So it's quite brave to choose to do something different. And not know how it's going to pan out. But all the while I thought, well, ultimately I could go back to what I was doing if I wanted to. But how many times in life do we get this chance to get off? I always call it the sort of the hamster wheel, where you're going round and because you don't get off, you can't know what it's like to be off the wheel. I've got this chance to be off the wheel. Let's explore it.
Yeah. I love that. A lot of that resonates with me, actually, particularly that identity of being wrapped up in your job, because, and I don't know if it is a thing when you're younger, like I qualified as a barrister, and to me that was the be all and end all. I was a barrister, it was what it was everything, and then slowly but surely you start to realise it's not everything. And similar to you, I've been 25 years in that job, but it's not lighting me up anymore. So I'm exploring other avenues as well, and I think it's great to get off that wheel and see what's out there, isn't it? And so do you think you've become braver? But it sounds like you've been pretty brave because you've been to all those places and you've branched out perhaps where a lot of people might not have had the courage to do that.
Yeah, I think so. It's funny, as we speak, stories will come to me. So when I was 18, I went to Colombia on my own for 6 weeks, and it was when Pablo Escobar had escaped from jail while I was there, and you look back though when you're young, I don't think, well, I didn't worry. I just did. I just went off and did, but that was pretty. out there, you know.
Yeah, no mobile phones, no
No,
internet.
no, nothing.
No.
You know, funny stories. We missed our connection. So I was with two other people, but I didn't know them at the time. And we missed our connection in Germany on the way out there, which meant we never arrived in Colombia. So the people that were actually going to connect with us and meet with us out there rang back home and said, your daughter's not got off the plane. And in a time without mobile phones,
Yeah.
so my mum is going completely bonkers, ringing
Yeah.
all the airlines.
Interpol.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And they won't give you any information. Meanwhile, I've hopped on a plane to Miami and I'm like, this is amazing. And we get put up overnight in Miami. And I send my mum a postcard, I think, you know, because again, it didn't have money necessarily to bring home. We've just had the most amazing stopover in Miami. Well, meanwhile, she's having a heart
She's
attack.
like planned your funeral and all sorts, yeah.
So lots of adventures, and I guess in some people's eyes it's brave, but I always saw those things as exciting to go and see the world. And
Yeah.
didn't probably think about the risks,
No,
thankfully, too much.
you don't do when you're younger, and I think perhaps it is only when you become a parent and your kids start becoming teenagers and they start to do stuff, and then you go, oh God, well, I was doing that at 13, and then I'm saying, no, you can't go there, it's not safe. And I don't think the world's any safer now or less safe than it used to be. I think it's about the same, but we know more, don't we, of the terrors and everything that's
Yes.
going on. So yeah, I think you've just got to put yourself back in that position sometimes, like you say, when you're parenting, and go, well, what was I like at that age?
And your question was, am I any more brave? Or I think as you grow, as I've grown older, is you worry less about things. So maybe, or I've learned that you just go and try things. So actually, I don't feel like I need to be as brave, because the world isn't going to end if something doesn't work out.
Yeah.
So perhaps it's not that I'm less brave, I'm less worried about being judged or the consequences of it. Because
Yeah.
a lot of what we don't do is because we're worried about being judged.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the fear, isn't it, of
Yeah.
what will people think, and that's something I've had to overcome, because that was my mum's first port of call in any situation. What will the neighbours say? What will they think? You know, literally. I'm like, and she'd say, people will say this. I'm like, what people? Who are these imaginary people who are so invested in watching our lives? I was like, they don't exist.
Yeah.
And if you can overcome that, then you can do whatever you want, can't you?
Yeah, and we can be quite hard judging ourselves as well without knowing it. So self-judging, you know, against standards that probably are part of how we've been brought up, or what we've been exposed to, what we think is what we should be doing. And therefore we judge ourselves all the time if we're not meeting that standard. And again, that's imaginary really, because
Yeah.
it's all, a lot of it's in our head.
Yeah. So I guess that's something you work when you're coaching people. Is that probably one of the first things you have to overcome, is their own self-limitation?
Yeah, I think so. One that you mentioned, mental fitness coaching, and I work with an organisation in the US called Positive Intelligence, and they actually have a free assessment that you can do, which is your saboteur assessment. So you can go online and look it up and just do it, and that pops up with the 10 most prevalent, the 10 saboteurs basically, of which you might have. You'll recognise them as stickler is perfectionist. So let's take everything's got a positive and a negative. So actually, if you're a stickler or a perfectionist, that's a good thing. And actually you might have a role where it's really important for you, that detail is really important to you in that job, and it serves you well, and it's meant that you've been successful. But actually, if you end up, for example, procrastinating all the time because you're worried that something isn't perfect, so you end up spending 10 hours on it instead of 1, or you stay up all night worrying because you think it's not going to be right, that's tipped you out of a positive place where your strength is becoming a weakness for you and creating lots of stress for you. So the saboteur assessment allows you, because a lot of coaching is about raising self-awareness. Who am I? When am I at my best, and what's stopping me being at my best? And this helps you immediately go, oh. So, for example, my top saboteur when I first did the assessment was hyperachiever.
Right.
So it won't surprise you.
No, I think with the CV, that makes total sense.
So you can see in some ways, and you can carry on with this, telling yourself, but this thing serves me because look how well I've done in life. But actually, it's recognizing when you're doing it, I guess, with the most, we call it a sage mindset. So it's a calm, positive mindset from a deep place of that's what you really want to do and what serves you, rather than you doing it out of fear, worrying what you might think of yourself, others might think, or it's something you should or ought to be doing to meet standards and to be accepted, because a lot of what we do is about acceptance. We want to feel accepted. We want, and we get driven by fear rather than positive emotions, and that's not a good place to be.
No.
So just by seeing that, and the first time I saw hyperachiever as one of my highest saboteurs, it literally stopped me in my tracks. And I'm not kidding, the next, from that moment onwards, I had the new awareness that actually whenever I went to add something into my calendar or to commit to something, I was like, why am I really doing this? Am I doing this because it's actually in line with my goals and what I want to achieve for me or for the people around me? Or am I doing it because I think I should be doing it and I'm going to be judged if I don't?
Yeah.
So it was really helpful.
That's really interesting. I am definitely going to go and do that as soon as I finish. Yeah. Because I think, self-awareness is key, isn't it?
It
and
is.
Again, I think because we're so bombarded by so much content, we don't know what our own self thinks anymore.
Yeah.
We've lost that self-awareness.
Yeah, I do a lot. I really, really enjoy doing work with clients and individuals around values. Because again, we absorb a lot of values from basically, we're born, somebody is telling us, whether we're at school or parents or influencers are telling us what our values should be and what's important. And few of us have sat and really thought about actually what is it that is really important to me. And it's not something you can sometimes discover in 10 minutes. It can take quite a lot of effort to break down the belief that value actually really belongs to you or doesn't belong to you anymore. I remember a client recently, it's really lovely when someone just almost throws off what they've been carrying. So they'd written down the values that they felt were theirs, and I had a sense that they weren't maybe their truest values. And after about 4 different sessions together, they had a completely different set of values, and they had this great comfort in them. And they said, I finally realized I've spent most of my life trying to be all those other things, and this is what I want and who I am. So it can mean that we're going through life living other people's values all the time, and that doesn't give us fulfillment or happiness, because it's fighting against our inner self